Kevin Brooks next up. So please welcome Storyteller Kevin Brooks.
I'm a friend of Michael Anderson, and a couple weeks ago I ran into him and he said, Kevin, you're going to be at the Shakespeare Slam, right? And I said, yeah, I'll be there. And then he said, and you're going to do something, right? I thought, yeah, I'll do something. So, not being one to procrastinate, I wrote this yesterday. I actually hate Shakespeare. Or I used to. When I was in high school, I really hated Shakespeare because I didn't understand it. I mean, it was like another language, which really frustrated me because I knew there were lots of English-speaking people that loved Shakespeare and all the these and thous, and I just thought those people were crazy. But of course, in high school, they assigned Shakespeare. Now, I went to a predominantly black high school in Philadelphia in the 70s, and there was a problem that the English department had then, and probably the entire school system, which is, how do you teach Shakespeare to a bunch of then real first generation 4 or 5+ hours a day TV kids? I mean, to a bunch of kids who knew every episode of Speed Racer and Gilligan's Island by heart. Where's there room for some 400-year-old dead white guy? You know, where? And the answer is that the key is to find a hook, the right hook. So this was the 70s now, so instead of trying to teach us all of Shakespeare's canon, instead of trying to, ply us with the love and desire of Romeo and Juliet, instead of trying to seduce us with the angst of Hamlet, because it was inner city, and in the 70s, they just focused on the two most racially charged of Shakespeare's plays, Merchant of Venice and Hamlet. Oh, I'm sorry, not Hamlet. Merchant of Venice and Othello. Now, Othello, let me tell you. Othello was a bad cat, man. I mean, Othello was like a blend of Colin Powell and an Elizabethan shaft. Except absolutely no one understood him, especially not his woman, and that was cool. But unfortunately, Shakespeare decided not to include much in the play that told us anything about how he got there. I mean, how he rose to be a general to the Duke of Venice. I mean, the guy is a general in Italy, right? How did he get there? Any backstory? No. Apparently, that's not important. What is important to Shakespeare is that Othello married a white girl. All right. So to us back then, even though the language was a challenge, soon into the story of Othello, it had our attention. You know what I'm saying? I mean, we wanted to know how this guy makes out. We want to know how this guy gets over. Well, except for the wannabe thugs in our class, they didn't really care. But to us, to the rest of us, we were all over this, black guy tries to get ahead stuff. So now, our senior year English teacher, Mrs. Brody, was not originally from Philadelphia. Mrs. Brody was from the South. Now, she was a light-skinned black woman from an intellectual family that was part of a Southern black elite culture that we teenagers in West Philadelphia knew nothing about. Mrs. Brody was from a culture of some privilege and expectations of black cotillions and white gloves. She was erudite and came from a world of tradition and formality. And we had no connection to this world whatsoever. Not only did we know nothing of her world, but her attitude of formality did absolutely nothing to help us with Shakespearean language. But teasing out the meat of the story was hard enough, but what we were being exposed to through Mrs. Brodie was a whole nother level of education in America. But now, getting back to the story. Iago is the SOB of the story. I mean, we recognize his ass. I mean, he was like the man in training. Right? Oh, look how he's talking about Othello behind his back, right? Check him out. Oh man, Othello should waste this guy. Othello should take out his sword and just have him eat steel, right? That's what he should do. But Othello doesn't waste Iago. Instead, Othello just falls for it. The lies, the cheating, the treachery. He gets taken slowly and completely over 5 acts. We watched Othello die for weeks. And we all vowed never to be that stupid. I mean, I don't care who this white woman is. I mean, how did he fall for Iago's crap? I mean, what was it? That made Othello susceptible to evil? His father accuses witchcraft because obviously that's the only way his daughter would have fallen for the guy. But Othello, cool, modestly, reminds Desdemona's father of the truth. I ran it through, even from my boyish days, to the very moment that he bade me tell it, wherein I spoke of most disastrous chances, of moving accidents by flood and field, of hairbreadth escapes, and the imminent deadly breach, of being taken by the insolent foe and sold into slavery, of my redemption thence and portents in my travels history, wherein of entrees vast and deserts idle, through quarries, rocks, and hills whose heads touched heaven, it was my hint to speak. Such was the process. And of the cannibals that each other eat, the anthropofungi and men whose heads do grow beneath their shoulders. This to hear would Desdemona seriously incline. But still the house affairs would draw her thence, whichever as she could, with haste dispatch. She'd come again, and with greedy ear devour up my discourse, which I, observing, took one suppliant hour, and found good means to draw from her a prayer of earnest heart, that I would all my pilgrimage dilate, whereof my parcel she had something heard, but not intentively. I did consent, and often did beguile her of her tears, when I did speak of some distressful stroke that my mouth suffered. My story being done, she gave me for my pains a world of sighs. She swore, in faith 'twas strange, 'twas passing strange, 'twas pitiful, 'twas wondrous pitiful. She wished she had not heard it, yet she wished that heaven had made her such a man. She thanked me and bade me, if I had a friend that loved her, I should but teach him how to tell my story, and that would woo her. Now, upon this hint I spake. She loved me for the dangers I had passed, and I loved her that she did pity them. This only is the witchcraft I have used. And now, almost 40 years later, like Othello, I am a storyteller, though hopefully not as stupid.